to begin with the question of what role does the media play. I know from all the comments that we've had already, the idea is that it is the media that causes the bad blood. It is the media that, through its rhetoric, through its angry debates, through its relentless questioning of the other side, tends to become the reason for the bad blood. And my case has been for years, and I've now been covering the India-Pakistan equation for about 20 years now, is that it is always the media that is used as a platform. When a message needs to be sent out, the media gets used. It means that it is still a fairly immature media, certainly on our side of the border, that does not understand that it is being used many of the times. I'll give you a small example, and it really relates to earlier this year. In January this year, I happened to be in Pakistan when news of the LOC beheadings broke out. And already in Pakistan, one person had been killed on the Pakistani side, and then the news came in that two of our Jawans had been killed. One of them had been beheaded. And I started to follow what was happening on Indian channels, because on Pakistani channels there was absolutely nothing. And I realized that it seemed to be, everyone was jumping the gun, everyone was bringing out facts before they had been confirmed officially. And I called a senior editor and I said, what's going on? Because everybody seems to be getting ahead of themselves, and I can tell you I'm on the Pakistani side, and so far there's really not been that kind of response. And their answer was, have you seen the DGMO's statement? And I said no, and I realized that it was this one statement that had been made up in one sector that had set off the media in a sense. And it's been my case since then that every time we see a flare-up in ties between the two sides, it's because somebody wants to make the statement. It happens on the Pakistani side, and I need to give you examples of it. I've seen it on my side, which is why I want to say, to begin with, I think the media likes to overplay its own role. It likes to believe that it is somehow deciding public opinion as well as somehow then taking it to its logical conclusion. But in fact, it isn't the media that decides the actual policy that happens. What it decides is really one turn. And given the fact that over the last 6 months, the two big stories on India-Pakistan relations were the beheadings at the LOC and was the killing of the prisoners on both sides. The truth is, over the large, broader policy, I don't think there has been an impact. But certainly at that time, because of the way they were played up, because of the way of, and certainly with the prisoners as well, it just so happened that I was back in Pakistan when the second round of bad blood happened. It seems to me fairly clear, and I'm giving the media's perspective, that in each of these cases there is a policy decision in a sense to push a certain story or not to push a certain story, and the media goes along with it. The biggest example perhaps came from Prashant's newspaper, written in fact by a colleague of mine now, Praveen Swami, when he brought out the fact that in fact there had been beheadings in 2011. The moment it became clear that those beheadings had in fact occurred in the past, suddenly the temperature came down on both sides. Now, again, to me, these are just examples of the fact that somebody somewhere wants to send a message out. And as I told Jay Panda earlier, that these two sessions are well put so that we can spend our session blaming the politicians and the establishment, and then they can blame us for all that goes wrong. The second part, really, in terms of the role the media plays, is that there is no question that we are catering to a viewing public. And what has happened a lot of the times with the viewing public is, and it's a part of society, that attention spans are much shorter. As a result, people are watching what reinforces their beliefs. And you are going to see that sort of pitch to extremist beliefs on the fringes of the media. A lot of what I spend doing is answering on behalf of the most extreme view in India, which is not actually the entire media universe. And I think that we have to start now making the differentiation, differentiating between media that is really catering to that, as I said, reinforced belief of shorter attention spans, and the media that is looking at both sides of the story. But finally, when it comes down to it, the media, as I said, has this impression of its own power, which I think is overblown. Eventually, what the media should be and can be able to do is reporting the facts on the ground, and that's where we face the biggest challenge. Because eventually, it is all irrelevant if I'm not able to get on the ground on the other side and bring the picture of what is going on over there. To begin with, there are the visa difficulties. We stand at a situation today where there are no reporters from either Delhi or Islamabad on the other side. I understand the PTI reporter may go next month, but as we stand, it is a sad and sorry reflection of where ties are, that neither side has at the moment posted reporters on the other side of the border. This is almost a situation worse than it possibly was 20 years ago. The second part is reporting difficulties, which journalists will tell you come with the territory. But there are reporting difficulties because when you're on the ground in a country, for an Indian in Pakistan or for a Pakistani in India, you face all kinds of issues. You get followed around. In India, for example, if I want to bring a guest even to Noida, it is a difficult situation because it's not part of Delhi. Simple communications are still very complex. I mean, we live in the second decade of the 21st century, and traveling from India and Pakistan is the vehicular equivalent of a bullock cart. SMSs don't go through. It's when you think about it, your phones are monitored, so obviously that's another thing out of the way. But my point is that at every level, the reporting on the ground is sort of stymied. And finally, I would say there is still a huge dearth of what they call the big picture. Editors on both sides are still not taking in the view of the other side. It often comes as an afterthought, maybe a week or 2 weeks after. We still don't have that regular analysis, big picture of the other side. And I think that these are all things that can quite easily be fixed. The second question our chair wanted us to talk about is really the popular perceptions in India and Pakistan. I'm not sure what decides popular perception, since I don't think anyone can speak on the subject, but from what I have seen on the ground, here are the big summaries I can possibly give. To begin with, big summits are viewed with a lot of trepidation in India. When they look at the India-Pakistan peace process, there's almost an element of fear. And I'm not just talking about the Lahore, followed by Kargil, IC-814 rhetoric, or Mumbai that came just after great talks between the foreign ministers. But if you look at actually every big high-level talks between 2005 and 2008, each time there were talks, there was something to derail those talks. Now that's the perception. The perception in India is, as a result of that, they see it as the work of the so-called deep state or of forces inside Pakistan that are inimical to dialogue. Perhaps over time, the reality will be to see it as the work of people who are opposed to the peace process and to work at it from that end. But the public perception certainly is that there is still a huge resistance to the peace process, which is shown every time there is a large breakthrough or large talks of any kind. The next public perception, and I'm happy to answer questions on any of this, is that the core issues today seem to be intractable. And it's an unfortunate thing to have to say, but issues like Kashmir, issues like terror, even as we've been discussing today, Silk Creek, Siachen, there's a whole new reality there which seem to indicate that those issues are not going anywhere, that they are not being solved by the peace process. What is the perception as a result of Track 2? I think over the years, Track 2 has built a space for itself. And there is no question that so much of what is discussed in Track 1 today are formulations that have come out of Track 2 that even we can recognize. That as a result, the track-through process has built that space. I think the important thing to remember is that despite all of these negative perceptions, as you would call them on the Indian side, people have not rejected the peace process. 7 months after the Mumbai attacks happened, the UPA, and particularly Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, many believe, in fact, that the 2009 election was won because of Prime Minister Manmohan Singh's push in the cities in India. In the urban centers, the Congress itself won, I think, close to 55 seats. Despite the fact that Prime Minister Manmohan Singh said he was still committed to the talks, that India did not break ties with Pakistan at the time, the UPA won that re-election. It didn't just win the re-election around the country, it won the state government in Maharashtra as well, where Mumbai is. I think every time we say there is no public support for the peace process, I think we have to keep looking at the empirical evidence. Has anyone lost an election because of ties with Pakistan? I'd like to ask that question because we keep hearing it as if that extreme point of view is in fact the general belief. There's a study that's come out, and the chair is not going to counter the study because it was done by the Australia-India Institute as well as the Lowy Institute. But it's an important study. It says, for example, as I said here, that 94% of those in India who were polled actually see Pakistan as a threat. But it goes on to say that 89%, and that's a huge amount, 89% agree that ordinary people in both countries want peace. 87% agree that a big improvement in India-Pakistan relations requires courageous leadership on both sides. And then 76% agree that India should take the initiative. Now, to me, these are startling findings. And I think they go a lot, maybe they're also convenient findings that I'm guilty of wanting reinforced beliefs, but I think they go with a lot of what I see on the ground. And I think a lot of the job for the media is going to have to be to counter this perception that the general belief is all negative. That's always going to be the case. What are the major stumbling blocks and how do we address them? Actually, I wasn't actually meaning that we need to copy paste from a previous year. But when you've got great suggestions, you might as well just sort of go ahead with them. And I remember these suggestions as well from previous years that say things like we must have newspapers, periodicals must be freely available on both sides. News channels should be accessible in both countries. I can assure you, having just been there in Pakistan one day and then Delhi the next, during the time of the LOC beheadings, I can assure you, if both sides could see what was happening on the other side, there would have been a greater sensitivity perhaps in Pakistan, understanding how serious this was an issue for us in India. And on the Indian side, I think if they had watched the I must say, dignified way that the Pakistani channels handled the entire event in terms of their casualty, I think there would be a sea change in understanding. I think this shutting down of each other's channels is not really helping anyone, except those who want to promote the cause of keeping those differences going. We had spoken about multi-entry long-term visas. I suppose all media discussions on India-Pakistan relations will always be whine about the visas, but it remains a situation. Pakistan elections this time, only a handful of journalists got visas from India, and this was after every other nationality did get a visa. We got visas one day before the campaigning ended, and I would like to whine much more, except that I must remember that in 2009, when India had elections, we actually gave no visas to any Pakistani journalists. So I have to be honest there. So accessibility of media, visas, and finally connectivity. Again, it's the bullock cart theory. We still have these 2 flights that go between Lahore and Delhi, twice a week, once to Karachi. It's a completely ridiculous system. The fact that my phone doesn't work when I go from Amritsar to cross the border to Wagah. These are all things that are just out of date and need to be treated as such. If there is one thing the media can actually do, it is to sort of bridge over a lot of what are basic basic roadblocks between the two countries and perhaps take that angle of it to a new level.